I want folks to understand that the process to kind of bring forth this took a lot of communication, time, and deliberation that I actually feel is reflective of the work that the council will be doing in the future, as well as the work that we are currently doing. And I just want to acknowledge that each week I have had the privilege of being able to see members, some who come in, some who maybe this is your first time, but some of you whom are returning. And so in this case, I would like to read, just for the sake of folks understanding what the language says, Resolution 24386 for the record. Calling for an immediate and permanent mutual ceasefire in Israel and Gaza. Whereas, when we speak as the City Council, we must unify our city and not divide it. And whereas, in this moment, we are especially concerned for the health and welfare of our Palestinian, Israeli, Muslim, and Jewish inhabitants who are deeply hurting. And whereas, the killing of the Palestinian, Israeli civilians and the targeting of civilians, no matter their faith or ethnicity, is a violation of international humanitarian law and a violation of Geneva Conventions. And whereas, our community mourned the horrific acts on October 7, 2023, perpetuated by Hamas that resulted in the death of over 1,100 Israelis, with more than 200 Israeli civilians taken hostage. And whereas between October 7, 2023 and March 5, 2024, the government of Israel's response through ongoing bombing and military strikes in Gaza has now killed at least 30,000 Palestinians, who are overwhelmingly civilian men, women, and children, and severely wounded countless more. And whereas on October 26, 2023, the United Nations General Assembly, in a near unanimous vote, called for an immediate and sustained humanitarian ceasefire. And whereas on December 12, 2023, the United Nations General Assembly passed with 153 countries in favor of a resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and ensuring humanitarian access. And whereas on March 4, 2024, the United Nations Office of the Special Representatives of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict verified credible claims of sexual violence on October 7, 2023 against Israeli civilians and hostages, and is urging a formal investigation. And whereas the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees has estimated that 70% of the civilian infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed and severely damaged, including hospitals, schools, homes. And whereas hundreds of thousands of lives are at imminent risk of death by continued violence, starvation, lack of medical treatment, or lack of public health and sanitation. If a mutual ceasefire is not achieved, basic needs and infrastructures are not restored, and humanitarian aid is not delivered without delay. And whereas an immediate and permanent mutual ceasefire creates the safest conditions for all parties involved, including the return of the remaining Israeli hostages, and ensures humanitarian aid can be delivered to Palestinians at the rate that's needed, preventing further loss of life. And whereas all forms of bigotry, violence, and oppression serve to divide our communities and weaken our effort to achieve collective safety, justice, and true multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy here and everywhere. And whereas the continued violence is being felt by our Jewish and Palestinian neighbors here in St. Paul, many with direct personal connections to the region and people at risk. And our council and city leadership are united in protecting our residents against the acts of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or hate crimes towards our Arab, Israeli, Jewish, and Muslim neighbors. And whereas we joined over 70 municipalities in the United States, including Hastings, Columbia Heights, and Minneapolis here in Minnesota, in taking a stand of the interests of humanity and the well-being of our constituents. And whereas we recognize the right of peace and safety for both the Israeli and Palestinian people, as well as for our residents here in St. Paul, now therefore be it resolved that the City of St. Paul calls upon our U.S. congressional delegation, both in the Senate and the House of Representatives, to join us in, number one, urging the Biden administration to immediately call for and facilitate de-escalation and a permanent mutual ceasefire to urgently end the current violence. And number two, urging the Biden administration to promptly facilitate the entry of humanitarian assistance of our administration as promised at the scale needed into North and South Gaza. And number three, ensuring the immediate release of all Israeli hostages taken by Hamas and the release of thousands of Palestinians unjustly imprisoned or held by Israel. And number four, condemning the use of murder, kidnap, and rape by Hamas on October 7th, 2023, And since, number 5, urging the Biden administration to hold international law and the January 26, 2024 order of the International Court of Justice by discontinuing unconditional U.S. military aid to Israel without clear guarantees for civilian safety. And be it further resolved, we, the St. Paul City Council, as local leaders, are urging our voices in cause for peace and to stand firmly against the rise of and all acts of racially motivated violence and hate crimes perpetuated against our Arab, Jewish, Muslim, and Israeli and Palestinian constituents here in St. Paul and around the United States. And be it finally resolved, we, the St. Paul City Council, ask the Office of the City Clerks forward a copy of this resolution to our United States House of Representatives Congresswoman Betty McCollum, our United States Senator Tina Smith, our United States Senator Amy Klobuchar, and our United States President Joseph Biden as St. Paul's federal elected officials with the most direct and primary responsibility to our constituents on this issue.